When we're working with companies, Stephen, the two skills we always start with are emotional regulation, often called emotion management, and self awareness. So, emotion management is that ability to identify triggers that can either cause you to respond in a manner you regret or in a manner that you're proud of. So, if we allow emotions to start taking over our conversations, we end up in the trigger response regret loop, and we want to avoid that. The mentor of mine once said to me, is she said, when you're stable, you are able. And this goes right back to we all know what it takes to be a great leader. But if you're someone that gets easily derailed, what happens is you actually start eroding trust with your team. Because, let's just use the hypothetical to get a visual. You're the sales manager that comes into the office, and your team is looking and observing who is showing up today, Captain Happy or Captain Moody. If people can't rely on you to be consistent in how you show up, well, number one, anytime you have inconsistency, it lowers trust. Think about a car that starts one day and doesn't start the other. You don't trust your car, right?
You're right. You pray that it's going to start.
Yeah. And for salespeople, they may not trust how you show up. So they may not bring problems and challenges because they don't know if it's the right day. As a result, because you're not being aware of the problems, the status quo goes into place. So emotion management is generally the first one we address. The second is emotional self awareness. But I always tell my clients that what you're not aware of, you cannot change. And that what you're not aware of, you are bound to repeat. So what happens if you have a low self-aware sales leader, they keep making the same leadership mistakes. And some of those may be without self-awareness, you also lack other awareness. So you don't even recognize how you show up. Maybe it's your facial expression. Maybe you're too intense. Maybe you're not being perfectly present. So that person doesn't feel important. So there are times that actually the manager can trigger fight or flight responses in their salespeople simply in how they're showing up. So those are the two skills we start with to, start developing and enhancing those skills with the sales leaders.
And I can't reiterate how important it is to be aware of our triggers because sometimes we have salespeople, customers, bosses who purposely try to trigger us to get a reaction. And if we're able to control that, I think we're so much better as a leader, as an individual to deal with.
Well, you're exactly right because triggers are not going to go away. They come in the form of people, places, and situations. I was just having a prospect call this week with a VP of sales, and he had pretty high emotional intelligence. One of his best salespeople gets emotionally derailed. But to this sales leader's credit, he doesn't get emotionally derailed because he has recognized this is something he needs to work with this salesperson on, but he doesn't react to this salesperson getting a little defensive, jumping to conclusions soon. So, as a sales leader, the ones that have self awareness generally can put a pause. And this is what's really, really important. Here's the trigger, but they put a pause in their reaction or response. So they have that ability to think before they speak, think before they act. Now, I'm curious on this. I've seen where sales leaders go along to get along. So they can be people that are very self aware. Well, maybe not self aware because they're not realizing they're going along to get along, but they can be emotionally stable. But without assertiveness, they don't hold the difficult conversations. Maybe they don't hold people accountable. How have you coached leaders to be assertive so that they do execute the right leadership behaviors?
That's a great question. I covered it a number of ways. And when I hear assertiveness, I link it to what I call being bold. And one of the tenets of bold leadership is having difficult conversations, which you refer to. And the most successful sales managers are not only ones who are driven, but those who are comfortable having difficult conversations. To be an effective leader, I focused really on three elements. One was becoming comfortable with having difficult conversations and the ability to engage as a fundamental aspect of assertiveness. Part of it is there's various steps. Some of the times we feel things are difficult. Well, in fact, if we believe they're difficult, they are. And we approach the conversation in such a way, think, oh my God, what's going to happen here? So some of it is preparation. If you want to assert yourself or if you want to say something and you are uncomfortable, and Probably more than half the people I work with and half the population is uncomfortable with having difficult conversations. They lack that assertiveness, at least in that area as a leader. And it's important to practice, believe that it's not difficult, be comfortable in your skin. Sometimes it's about getting centered, just with deep breathing before you're going into a difficult conversation, right? It helps. And being open to provide that feedback and understand that people usually pick up on what's your intent when you're delivering a message. If your intent is to help, and maybe you say that, it's okay to assert what you want to say to the other person. In fact, in most cases, it builds respect.